2025 WNBA Finals presented by YouTube TV. We'll begin with remarks from Commissioner Cathy Engelbert, and then we'll turn it over to question and answer. Please have.
What if you were given a golden ticket to mainstream prominence, a key that might open a billion-dollar future, and you just refuse to turn it? The WNBA was in just that situation. Caitlin Clark, a cultural phenomenon and generational talent, was the league's key. And while the whole world watched for the first time, Cathy Engelbert, the league's commissioner, witnessed a move that was so cruel and perplexing that it left millions of fans, both new and old, wondering in horror. Is the WNBA deliberately attempting to undermine its own success? The league has battled for every bit of media attention, every dollar in sponsorship, and every fan in the seats for decades. Then a single player showed up and overnight altered the whole equation. This was more than a single position on a basketball team's roster. This concerned a turning point that may shape women's athletics for the next 20 years, and the decision has sparked an ongoing whirlwind of discussion, controversy, and unadulterated rage. The truth of what really transpired in the WNBA's corporate offices and behind the closed doors of Indiana Fever basketball is more stunning, more political, and exposes a far deeper issue than anybody could have predicted. It all started when a force of nature unlike anything the sport had ever seen stepped onto the court. Caitlin Clark was more than simply a basketball player in college. She was a walking, talking revolution in sneakers, a cultural tidal wave. Her Iowa Hawkeyes games not only set viewing records for women's basketball, they destroyed basketball records overall, whether for men or women. Her final thrilling collegiate performance in the 2024 NCAA Women's Championship game attracted an astounding 24 million viewers, with an average audience of 18.9 million. It was the most viewed basketball game of any kind in the United States in 5 long years. So, put that figure into stark perspective. More people watched it than the NBA Finals that year. More people watched it than the World Series championship games or the later rounds of the Masters. The American public's message was as loud and clear as a stadium buzzer. They wanted to see Caitlin Clark play basketball, not just basketball in general. That enormous, enthusiastic audience followed her straight to the WNBA when the historically struggling Indiana Fever selected her first overall. The league, which had spent 25 years trying to overcome the perception that it was a niche sport, suddenly and almost overnight became the most sought-after event in town. With an average of 2.1 million viewers, Caitlin Clark's professional debut game on ESPN2 was the most viewed game in the league in more than 20 years. To accommodate the tens of thousands of fans, many of whom were first-time WNBA attendees eager to catch a glimpse of her signature logo three-point shots, teams that were used to playing in quiet, half-empty arenas rushed to move their home games against the Indiana Fever to massive NBA stadiums. Within an hour of the draft, Fanatics sold out her number 22 jersey. It was not only a bestseller, but it also outsold every player's jersey from every other club in the league combined. She was a one-woman economic stimulus package because of security risks and logistical challenges of flying the most famous female athlete in the world on commercial flights. The league also had to address the long-standing issue of chartering private flights for teams. There was a Caitlin Clark effect. It was the largest boost the league had ever experienced, and it was measurable. However, while sponsors, fans, and TV networks were ecstatic about her arrival, a very different and far more antagonistic mood was developing inside the league among some of the same players who stood to gain from her popularity. The public was shown the red carpet, but behind the scenes, a harsh, bordering on sadistic welcome was being carefully prepared. Caitlin Clark's targeting was brutally evident from the opening possession of her debut game. She was subjected to significantly more physical contact than is customary for rookie hazing, or the typical welcome to the league moments that often come with being a top draft pick. She was routinely and alarmingly hip-checked, shoulder-checked, elbowed, and knocked to the floor. Officials often failed to call fouls, as if they too were participating in this unspoken test. Some veteran players appear to have reached a quiet agreement to challenge her, break her confidence, and prove that the WNBA was a different level, where her collegiate fame meant nothing. However, one particular incident blew the lid off the entire situation and made the world aware of the hostility directed at her. Alyssa Thomas was waiting for the ball to be inbound during a nationally televised game against the Phoenix Mercury. Caitlin Clark was standing nearby, uninvolved in play, and not defending Alyssa Thomas. Caitlin Clark was sent falling to hardwood floor by Alyssa Thomas's nasty, unexpected shoulder check and verbal abuse. There was nothing to do with basketball. It was a deliberate act of hostility away from the ball, an obvious cheap shot. The referee's decision to rule a common foul was so blatantly incorrect that the league management had to intervene and retrospectively elevate it to a flagrant 1 foul after the game due to the intense public uproar. The response was much more revealing than the occurrence itself. In a revealing silence at her post-game news conference, Alyssa Thomas declined to respond to any questions about it. What is even more unsettling is that Caitlin Clark's collegiate competitor, teammate Aya Wilson, was seen on tape jumping up from the bench and cheering the violent behavior. It was more than simply strong defense. This was a private matter. The millions of fans who follow Caitlin Clark received this message as well. Your new favorite, the one you believe will rescue this league, does not belong here. This simmering animosity on the court was just the outward manifestation of a far bigger and more significant struggle taking place behind closed doors. A struggle of power and egos that would result in a decision so startling that it would absolutely astound the sports world. A huge international basketball tournament was approaching as the turmoil on the floor continued to escalate. The 2024 Paris basketball tournament, representing a nation on a global stage, is the ultimate goal for every exceptional athlete, a dream come true. Almost everyone, fans, media analysts, and marketers, saw Caitlin Clark's addition to the Team USA squad as inevitable for a star of her extraordinary caliber. The question was not if the announcement would be made, but rather when. Many fans saw Team USA women's basketball as a contemporary dynasty, and appeared to be the most natural and sensible decision to bring the world's most popular and watched basketball player into its already star-studded spotlight. Although her famed gravity-warping three-point range would be a deadly weapon against any defense, the selection was not just based on her unquestionable talent. More significantly, it had to do with basketball's business and expansion. It would be a once-in-a-lifetime chance to expose Caitlin Clark and the WNBA to billions of people worldwide. NBC executives were virtually salivating over potential for viewership. You could almost see the Caitlin Clark camera becoming a constant presence on TV, following her every step and attracting millions upon millions of casual viewers from all over the globe who had just heard rumors about this Iowa basketball sensation. Not only was her inclusion anticipated, but the business community saw it as a clear and essential strategic step for the long-term viability and expansion of the women's game. The conditions were ideal for her worldwide coronation, which would have transformed her from a national phenomenon into a genuine global star and attracted hordes of new WNBA supporters. Or so everyone on Earth believed. Even though the news was released on a calm Saturday morning, it had an enormous impact on the sports industry, reverberating through news outlets and social media sites. Trusted sources released the women's basketball team's 12-person roster, and Caitlin Clark's name was missing. Pure, undiluted incredulity was the first universal response, but it soon gave way to a tidal surge of fiery rage. How could the selection committee have left the most influential and well-liked player in the whole sport at home? Whether it was basketball logic, business logic, or common sense, the choice appeared to contradict all logic. Players like the great Diana Taurasi, Brittany Griner, and Breanna Stewart were among the established veterans and WNBA superstars who made up the team. They were all outstanding athletes, prior winners, and worthy individuals in their own right. However, none of them had even a small portion of Caitlin Clark's star power, cultural significance, or capacity to attract crowds. Not even close. Removing her from the squad seemed more like a profoundly personal political power move than a basketball decision based on merit. The millions of new fans she had single-handedly attracted to the sport were being informed that the athlete they loved was not welcome on the largest platform, which was a terrible smack in the face to both her and them. The reaction was fierce, immediate, and overwhelming. A flurry of controversy erupted on social media, TV news networks, and sports talk programs. The story quickly went beyond the realm of athletics and became national news, sparking a broad discussion about professional jealousy, gatekeeping, and a startling, disastrous failure of top-level leadership. The committee had made its decision, But by doing so, they had unleashed a PR disaster of their own creation and given every critic who had ever said that the WNBA was an antiquated, exclusive organization that intentionally opposed progress and rejected popular success a huge, powerful weapon. What then took place? The whole catastrophic scenario would only become worse due to the official effort at an explanation. The decision-makers of Indiana Fever basketball had to provide an explanation in the face of intense public criticism and claims of a deliberate snub. The stated justifications for Caitlin Clark's startling omission were so tenuous as to be offensive. Through anonymous leaks to the media, the selection committee pointed out that she had only played a few WNBA games at the time of the selection, citing her lack of professional experience. Additionally, they carefully and ambiguously brought up the significance of team chemistry, implying that the addition of such a powerful media magnet and celebrity might upset the existing experienced squad's delicate balance. However, the slightest investigation caused their feeble justifications to entirely crumble. Sports historians and experts quickly and firmly refuted the experience argument by pointing out that former superstars like Candace Parker in 2008 and Breanna Stewart in 2016 had both made the basketball squad as rookies with little professional experience. Introducing fresh talent on the biggest basketball stage was, in fact, standard procedure. To be honest, the chemistry argument was even more blatant and offensive. It was a barely disguised piece of business jargon that suggested the veteran players really did not want Caitlin Clark there. It played straight into the narrative that had been developing for weeks, that the WNBA's old guard was bitter over Caitlin Clark's sudden, seemingly effortless fame and the unprecedented level of media attention she attracted. The committee seemed to be terrified, which was the underlying reality that everyone sensed but no one would publicly state. They feared the media circus that would unavoidably follow Caitlin Clark. They feared that if the coach did not give her enough playing time, supporters and the media could take offense. Above all, they were terrified of upsetting the influential veteran players, especially Diana Taurasi, who appeared unwilling to pass the baton to a new generation based on their on-court behavior and public remarks. The league's internal politics, personal grudges, and pure, unadulterated envy were at the core of the far harsher and more complex truth that the official explanations were really a pitiful cover for. But what really exposed the ruthless, well-thought-out character of the whole decision was a reaction, or lack thereof, from the one person who had the power to quiet the storm. WNBA Commissioner Cathy Engelbert became the center of attention as the dispute got out of hand. This was her pivotal opportunity to take charge of the story, protect the league's most valuable asset, and convince the millions of new fans that the WNBA was a cutting-edge, forward-thinking organization fit for the limelight. Instead, the public was treated to a masterclass in business avoidance, doublespeak, and a terrible lost opportunity. Cathy Engelbert's public remarks were weak, defensive, and showed a total inability to understand the depth of the public's outrage. She continually attempted to steer the subject away from the angry 800-pound elephant in the room and robotically defended the selection committee's independent process, while focusing on the outstanding athletes who did make the basketball roster. She had a fantastic opportunity to express her excitement for Caitlin Clark's future with the Indiana Fever, recognize her transcendent impact, and make a bold statement. She could have presented the league as the proud home of the world's most talked-about athlete, a figure so significant that she had become the focus of a national controversy. Instead, she opted for bureaucratic, dry, and safe language that only served to worsen the situation. This was the video's actual cruel choice. A brilliant athlete was not simply left off the roster by a committee of people. The league's commissioner chose to defend the status quo at the expense of her superstar when confronted with a crisis that sprang directly from internal jealousy and gatekeeping. The world received a terrifying and obvious message from her silence and weak defense of the decision. The league's leadership was either reluctant or completely incapable of managing the phenomenon with which it had been so generously blessed. At the most significant turning point in the league's 28-year history, it was a disastrous leadership failure. However, Caitlin Clark's exclusion from the basketball team has far-reaching consequences. The WNBA and its broadcast partners may have to live with the consequences of this enormous, almost unforgivable financial and marketing error for years to come. It might cost billions of dollars,